Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, and it's our roundup of stories making headlines across northern Michigan as we chat with the journalists who are covering those stories. And this week joining me is Pat Sullivan from the Northern Express. Pat, welcome back.
Thanks. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning to you. Good to have you back. And it's been a busy couple of weeks. We've actually had a couple of weeks off from the show, but news-wise, it's been pretty active in the last couple of weeks especially. I guess I want to go back a week ago to the story down in Benzie County, which we've both been covering with the Stapleton family. Give us your take on that and where we stand now. We've obviously got a mother charged with attempted murder for the incident involving her autistic daughter.
Well, it's truly a heartbreaking case, and it's going to be an interesting one to follow because it's going to be very difficult for the system to figure out what justice is in this case. How do you figure out how to punish a woman who was, by all accounts, doing anything she could to help her daughter, and then just reached some point of desperation where she felt she needed to end it all? I mean, it's when you really start thinking about it, it's such a sad story, and it's going to be very challenging, I think, for the prosecutor and for the court system to figure out how to resolve this problem.
I mean, by the letter of the law, not that I know the specific legality of the letter of the law, but an attempted murder charge would provide for XYZ penalties.
Up to life in prison.
Right, but we've got all these mitigating circumstances, and then not only that, but when you get in front of a jury, then what happens?
Right, because I think, and also you have, where are you even going to find a jury? Because I know that in Alberta, the community has just rallied to the support of the Stapleton family, just without any hesitance. They were bringing them meals. They were, raising money. People, and I think there was already that impetus because people were already trying to help out the family because of the struggle that they were having with this autistic girl who was prone to violent outbursts. And
this was a very public struggle. Over the years, they've had multiple fundraisers. They've gone to the community. Mom's got a blog. They did a news interview with Grand Traverse Woman magazine this year. They did a TV interview, I think, on TV 7 and 4. This was, anyone in Benzie County knows this family. Most people across northern Michigan have probably heard, or it would ring a bell to hear this family's name.
And the family was well known outside of that. The father, of course, is the principal at the Frankfort High School and football coach, and it's a well-known name in the community. And they wound up with this problem that was just so difficult for. It would be a horrific problem to have to contend with. A daughter who you love who has a medical condition that causes her to be violent, and apparently there was no way to treat it. And I was struck over the winter. A local newspaper in Alberta, a volunteer newspaper called the Alberta Alert, launched a fundraising drive to help, they were soliciting funds to help get Issy Stapleton into treatment. And I think they raised, if I remember correctly, around $32,000. And so, and that for a town the size of Alberta, a town that isn't a wealthy town by any means, that's a lot of money to raise. And it shows just how much, support and love there was there for this family. And then the flip side of that is that $32,000 was about enough to send the daughter to about a month's worth of in-house treatment. A month, and that wasn't even the beginning of what they needed. So they could raise what seemed like a fortune, and they were still nowhere near where they could.
And my understanding, just from I checked out the Facebook pages of Kelly Stapleton, the mom, and just from what I was able to piece together, it appeared as though their daughter Izzy had just come back from treatment 3 days before this incident. This was, so whatever happened, they were so glad to have her back, was the mom's last post. We're thrilled, she's coming home, that was Sunday, and then here we are Tuesday afternoon, and all hell breaks loose.
And I may be wrong about this, but I think there was another post that was put up between Sunday and the disappearance, and I think it was deleted then, but I think it talked about some of the frustration that she felt.
It's a sad story, like you said. I don't know what you've heard in the newsroom or in the community. The most popular comment I think I hear is it's just a sad story. But I was kind of surprised on Sunday at my church. I heard so many people saying, well, that woman doesn't belong in jail. That jail is no place for that woman. That's not going to help her. That's not the help she needs.
I think that's a prevailing. I mean, that's why it's going to be so difficult to prosecute this case, because I think that I wouldn't be surprised if you went into Benzie County if 90% of people felt that the woman didn't belong in jail, despite. If you just strip everything down and look at
the facts,
look at just what she did. If you isolate the incident, that's horrible. But if you look at it in the context of everything else, it suddenly looks like a completely different act.
Yeah. Lots to follow on that one, and I'm sure we'll have competency hearings and mental health evaluations and whatnot in the weeks ahead. But she's still in jail in Benzie County,
as far as I understand.
Another story from this week, equally tragic, if obviously the end result not even more so. The state trooper down in Mason County killed in a traffic stop, and kind of the ensuing chase for suspects and pursuit of those suspects. Trooper Paul Butterfield killed on Monday night this week.
Another tragic story.
Yeah. What? Where do you go from here? And I know Northern Express. Are you guys covering this story, or is this kind of out of the geographic area that you normally would focus on?
It would be just outside of our geographic area, because Mason County is just south of Manistee, and we go just south to Manistee. But I am going to be writing a little bit about this, because they found, and I have to track this down today. I think they caught up with the suspects in Dublin, which is in Manistee, and then I think the shootout was in Wellston. I've seen two different things.
Yeah, I've seen both in the sequence of events.
I have to, but either Dublin or, it came into our geographic area in the end. And these guys I think they're from Irons.
Yeah, I've seen both Irons and Luther too.
So there's that community, which I think covering crime a lot of my job is covering crime. I have to say that a disproportionate number of things happen in Wellston compared to that area has more problems than other areas. I've noticed that in the last few years. So anyway, a lot of it happened there, and so I'll write something about it.
The thing that just struck me, and it didn't even click for me until I saw the court paperwork for this Mason County court case yesterday. Last thing I can remember is baby Kate in Mason County, and maybe it's just psychological for me, but it just seems like, wow, another thing in Mason County.
Another huge thing. Yeah. And this one is so tragic because it sounds like nobody can really figure out what this guy was thinking. Like,
why?
What was he looking at a suspended license charge? Was he looking at apparently he didn't have a warrant out for his arrest. What was he trying to get out of that caused him to take this drastic action?
And all I've heard so far is the stolen car. That was did they not just want to? He just didn't want to get caught and arrested for a stolen car. So you trade a 6-month probationary period for now you've turned it into murdering a police officer. What? Gosh, I don't even know where to go from here, because now we've got the other suspect in this is kind of maybe the interesting twist to the story is we've got a 21-year-old wife who's 6 months pregnant. Yeah,
it's crazy, and it sounds like they don't really know what her responsibility is at this point. I mean, from what I've seen, they're still trying to figure out how culpable she is. Was she an accessory after the fact? Did she play a role in the shooting? Where is it going to fall for her? Because right now I think she's been charged with accessory after the fact and auto theft, and so she's facing 5 years in jail. So I mean, that could go either way. They could find out, that she was more active participant, and she could be looking at life too.
Well, and then the question that ran through my mind was, does she give up information on her husband? Does she share what really happened? Does she lay all the evidence out against him? Or does she protect her husband and take her right not to testify against a spouse? That's another thing, another part of the case that is going to change a lot over the next few months.
It'd be interesting to see how that happens, because you would think that, I mean, who knows what's going through her mind, but there's not a lot you could do for the spouse at this point, is there? I think that they tracked him down so quickly, and I think that his actions when he was confronted by the police can be used as evidence of his guilt. So the shootout, that's not the way a normal person behaves. It's probably the way a person behaves after they shoot and kill a police officer, and so that could be introduced as evidence, and so they've probably got a pretty good case against him.
The interesting thing, the hard thing about a story like this, for me, and I presume for you, is we rely on a press release. We'll make some phone calls. We've got, for our radio station, we're part of the Michigan Radio Network, so if they've got a reporter from Grand Rapids, for example, who goes to this news conference in Rockford, which they did, we can get some sound bites from that. But I don't go to Rockford to cover a story. I mean, I can't spend 5 hours on the road and back covering this kind of story. How hard is it for you when you've got something that's just so far away yet is such a big story?
Well, what I do is I don't try to cover the breaking news story, which I still consider this a breaking news story. I'll write something about it for our public safety page. I'll write 4 or 5 paragraphs for our next edition, and I'll stick pretty much to what the press release says. And if I decide to do a story, a feature story, that's 1,000 words long down the road, which in this case, this would be a candidate for that because there's so many interesting questions, then I would try to get the police report. I'd go down and visit and try to talk to people and go look at court files and do as much research as I could, and I'd put a lot of work into that. That's where I put my time and resources for the stories and for the other stuff, because I'm a one-man operation. I can only do so much on these.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got like 10 or 11 things a week that I'm writing a little thing about, so I don't have a lot of time I can't run down there and check on things for that.
The other, this is almost the reverse of the Stapleton story in Benzie County, in that the community rallies behind this woman and this tragedy despite the circumstances. And then in Mason and Manistee County, we've got, because of these circumstances, now I'm just kind of curious what the community will say about the suspect or suspects in this case. We're hearing that the suspect, Eric Nyes, was a troubled young man, 19 years old, somewhat of a criminal record, if I'm not mistaken. But again, the community that knows these people down there, that was torn apart by it too.
Yeah, and these guys are going to get no sympathy and they're going to get no support.
Right.
I mean, but what can you say about a guy like that? It sounds like it was an utterly selfish move on his part, and so I don't know where they get any sympathy, except at the point where, except at the point when he's sent away to prison for the rest of his life.
Like I said, it's just almost polar opposite of Benzie County. Well, Pat, let's talk about the story you're working on for this week that we can check out in the Northern Express. You've got a kind of an unusual, last week?
Yeah, it was out in the last week's paper.
A last week story on kind of an unusual story about a housing situation where the size of someone's house is an issue. And at first glance, or first time you hear that, you might think someone's got this monstrosity of a mansion that's encroaching on somebody else, but quite the opposite.
And in fact, this is in Centerville Township in Leelanau County, and there is no maximum size. You can build, you could, I guess there's lot lines, and there's lot line setbacks, but basically you can build square footage as much as your land can, as much as you have land. You can't, however, build something smaller than 800 square feet in this township, and this is true of a lot of townships in the area. There's some are at 1,000, some are at 700. A couple don't have any limit. I first started reporting this story last October when I found out about this couple, Rolf and Mary von Walthausen in Leelanau County. They had a dream to live as close to nature and as simply as they could. They didn't want to use any resources that they didn't have to use, and so they built this adorable 240 square foot house with a loft. Didn't have running water, didn't have electricity. They had an outhouse. It was in the middle of a 50-acre parcel, so they had to haul water in from the road. I mean, it was like a 15-minute walk hauling water in from the road. But this was their dream, and it was the way they wanted to live. And they said about doing this, and then they also said about they wanted to share this with other people. They knew that they weren't quite within building code, and they knew that they weren't quite within what the township expected of a residents, but they allowed me to do a story about them despite that. And they knew at the beginning they were taking a risk, and I knew that they were taking a risk. We discussed that, and I wrote the article as carefully as I could, but it was clear in the article, by describing what they were doing, that they weren't following all the rules. The article that I wrote in October of last year caused them a lot of problems. Since then, the township has been after them, and they've been basically trying to, first they charged them with a violation and told them that they could no longer live in their house, and then the von Walthausens tried to change the zoning ordinance. First they went to the Zoning Board of Appeals and they asked for an exception, and they were turned down. Then ultimately they tried to ask for a change in the zoning ordinance to eliminate the 800 square foot minimum requirement, and that ultimately failed. And they were kind enough to let me do the follow-up.
I was going to ask if they're still speaking to you.
Fortunately, they don't blame me, fortunately.
So is this a case where you think they can either win or prevail, or the township will just give up? I mean, what could they potentially have as a consequence? Well, you must build another 600 square feet?
Yeah, that's it. I have to do that.
And I guess my other thought would be, what would your vision of that be? Because I would just envision a nice 600-foot entryway.
They could goof around like with that, I guess. But they were, the other thing is, they have been told that it has to be a 800 square foot footprint. So you can't have 400 square feet on top of 400 square feet, which to me, why can't you do that? But so they're going to build something, and they're still hoping it will be an example of, small living, and they love where they are. By the way, the reason why Centerville Township and a lot of other townships have this requirement is it wasn't Centerville, it was put in place in the 70s. I think that's where it was in most places. The townships wanted to keep out trailer homes. They didn't want people starting up trailer parks. And they figured if it's 800 square feet, it's going to be, that's going to be
bigger
cheap.
than a trailer park.
You know what happened?
Home, yeah.
The trailer home industry just made all their trailer homes 820 square feet. So this was created for one reason, and it didn't work. It didn't accomplish the reason that it set out to.
Is there any support from the township, either one person here or there?
Oh no, yeah, there was
5-2 vote, or?
There was a lot of support. They got the Township Planning Commission supported the elimination of the minimum square foot requirement. The county supported the elimination of the square foot requirement. A lot of people showed up at meetings, but it was the township supervisor and there are 5 people on the township board, but the township supervisor opposed them, and he had 2 other people who were with him who also voted to maintain so
it was close.
It was close. And in fact, they thought for a while, they were sure that it was going to go through. I mean, the county said, yeah, you guys should eliminate this requirement. It doesn't make any sense anymore. The Planning Commission said, oh yeah, there's no reason to have this requirement, so we shouldn't have it. And then the the township's point of view was, well, there's no reason not to have the requirement, so we should keep it.
In the closing minutes here, we have, of course, the September 11th anniversary this week, and I guess just wanted to take a couple minutes quickly, Pat, to have you kind of tell us where you were on that morning.
Bill,
and what you remember.
Why don't you tell me where you were that morning?
Who's asking the questions here?
I've been talking a lot. Tell me where you were that morning.
I was employed and I was working. I had a career, but I was actually off that day, and I was an hour away from work. So, as a reporter, man, that bugged the heck out of me.
I bet. So, where were you employed at the time?
I was in Indiana, in Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay.
At a TV station there, and I was an hour away. And I think it's probably the best and worst thing that could have happened, because I wanted nothing more than just to stay glued to the television and watch all day. And had I been working or had to jump in the car and drive an hour to go to work, I would have missed out on everything, you know. And I guess my humanity just wanted to watch and pay attention and be in the loop.
Yeah.
So that was hard.
It was a hard day. It was a really hard day.
It almost feels, it just feels weird, because it seems like every time I go on vacation or every time I'm off, something big happens. Osama bin Laden was killed a couple of years ago. I was out of town, not working. There's 3 or 4 examples I can think of where it's like, all right, what am I going to miss this time when I leave town? But you were in Traverse City at the time at the Record Eagle?
Yeah, I was working at the Record Eagle. And
were you at work already?
Yes, I was. I remember like a lot of details from the day pretty clearly. It was obviously started out as a normal day, and like it was in the office, and there's a TV in the office, a small television set, and we saw the news alert about the first plane hitting. And you remember the first story for the first 10 minutes or so, it didn't sound like I don't think they thought it was a commercial airliner, and it sounded like just an errant pilot of a small plane had flown in. But it was still curious enough so that a lot of us got up and we went to the TV, and we were watching the TV when the second one hit. Yeah. And then we all knew, like, holy moly. And then I had mixed feelings. I mean, I was in a fog that whole day, and I spent the whole day doing doing the local reporting on it, and that was hard to do. It was being in such a fog and having such. I remember 2 things from that morning that really stand out. The first was that I was really, at the time, my brother lived not far from there, and I was really worried about what was happening with him, and I didn't hear from him for another day or so. The other thing is I was driving around about an hour later with our photographer at the time, Elizabeth Conley, and she made the observation that as you drove down the street, like we were driving down Front Street, and she said, look, you can tell who's heard about it and who hasn't by like looking at the people as they were walking down the street. And I was looking, and yep, you could tell. You could just look at a person, and you could tell whether they'd heard yet or not.
Wow, it just gave me chills when you said that. What did you find to do locally that first day?
I don't even remember what my stories were. I remember a lot of I remember the day really well, but I don't remember. I can't tell you what my stories were.
Yeah, and that's the funny. I don't remember what I did that next day or the week or the day after, because I went back to work right away.
It seemed like it seemed meaningless, you know.
Yeah.
It just.
And how do you localize something like that? You're just trying to fill space or fill time, or just an awkward thing. Well, Pat, I appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts with us this week, and thank everyone for tuning in to the briefing room, along with Pat Sullivan from the Northern Express. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio, and we will see you again next time right here on the briefing room.